And now we're going to hit record in three, two. Welcome to another
Okay.
episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. As you know, we like to talk to people and hear what they think is important for entrepreneurs to know, whether it's how to build their business, what to look out for, the opportunities. And this individual wrote a book, multiple books actually, one in particular called the B Corp movement. All right. So better business, right? How the B Corp movement is remaking capitalism. I've never heard of the B Corp movement. So I did a quick little glance at the summary, and it's quite fascinating. And it seems like some big names are involved in this. So this will be a fun conversation. The author is with us today, who has a background in my hometown, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it is an honor to have you here, Christopher Marquis.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Wonderful, wonderful to be here.
Well, let's start off with the genesis of this book. You have another one that's
Sure.
coming out very soon that's in pre-order mode, but let's hold
Yeah,
off on that one. And let's
sure.
talk about the B Corp movement. Exactly. What is it, and why did you want to write this book?
Sure. So a B Corp is a company that is certified for its social and environmental performance. So, you think about things like organic or fair trade or LEED certified buildings. These are certifications for specific products or services, but actually the business, there's no other certification for the overall business. And that's what a B Corp is. I got to know about this from my students. So I'm a professor. I'm actually, I'm across the pond in Cambridge, UK right now.
Got
I'm
it?
at Cambridge, but obviously I'm American, grew up in Pittsburgh, spent a lot of time there, a lot of time there still. But when I was in the US, my students actually were the ones who really turned me on to this movement. I've always been teaching and researching on sustainable businesses, how businesses can, sort of do well by doing good. And my students one day said to me, we shouldn't be studying these large companies. We should be studying B Corps, companies that have a social mission at their core. And I cold called the certifying body. Actually, it was in 2009, and said I would love to research and write about you. And they sort of welcomed me in, and since then, it's been about 15 years of, just amazing innovations that I've learned about, which I'm sure we'll get into in our podcast.
Yeah, this book came out in 2020 when I guess it was all hell was breaking loose at this point,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So is that maybe you had some time to sit down and write, but there are some big names behind this, right? I mean, we're talking about Richard Branson and I guess some individuals who are connected to Ben and Jerry's, and I think there's a few
Totally.
other ones that stand out in the intro. So who really latched on to this idea and put some money behind it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a lot of companies that are sort of well known for their and pretty much environmental or social impacts. So Patagonia,
Oh
big
yeah.
supporter, Allbirds Shoes, Seventh Generation, Warby Parker. A lot of companies that are really thinking about how they can actually, be sustainable as a business. And the thing that I find really compelling and why I end up writing the book, it's great that these companies are focused on these topics or and sort of want to certify, but actually what this movement has done is created a lot of tools, processes, procedures to help all businesses. So there's a part of the certification companies have to go through. It's called the B Impact Assessment. And it really is like a stakeholder analysis tool where companies can understand like how they're performing in regards to the environment or what their employee benefits are like or how they're engaging in their community. And there's hundreds of thousands of companies that are using this. A lot of venture capital investors are using this as a way to due diligence the firms because they think it's a way to sort of screen out long-term risk and things like that. So it's a movement to really, improve the quality and management of business. And as you mentioned, the title of the book is called Better Business. And the reason I actually named it that is because like so many of the companies that I interviewed and researched, they said, we got into this because we believed in social and environmental responsibility, but we came out of it a better business because actually, going through this sort of due diligence and process, just the business is more, longer term risk is lower. It's sort of future proofing your business almost.
Yeah, and I have interviewed people who have latched onto this idea and they were able to implement certain things that saved them money. And I think that's the only
Totally.
way that people will jump on board is if it actually does cost or it saves some type of expense or grows their
Totally.
business in some capacity. Am I right?
Totally. I mean that's I mean definitely that's a lot of what I've heard. Both on the cost savings and like brand lift, reputation type of side as well.
So sell this idea to us, all right? And this is just me kind of
Sure.
getting into the weeds of this book, all right? As an entrepreneur, whenever I was starting a business, I was worried about food on my table. All right. Let me just pay for my gas bill or my mortgage,
Sure.
right? That is always step one, right? It's a
Yeah,
survival
yeah.
mechanism. Let's get the business going. And then there's a point where you start to become very efficient. But it doesn't start with let's be efficient and then let's make money. It's let me make money and then let me find
Sure.
my way. So why should people have this in mind before they even have a sustainable business?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think that actually, this is not the like first or second or maybe even third thing a company is going to actually do. They're going to want to get themselves sort of established. And, it's interesting during COVID, the number of B Corps actually doubled. And I think it relates to actually exactly what you're saying, that, maybe many companies had wanted to do it and it was like number two or three on the list, but then COVID hit and they had a little slowdown and they said, okay, let me actually turn to this, B Corp system. So I don't think it's going to be, sort of, I agree. I mean, companies need to sort of put their food on the table first. But I think that actually, if you want to think about after you get yourself a little settled, actually establishing your business for the long term, hundreds of companies I've talked to have told me, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you may not actually know all the right sort of procedures to put in place to actually have your business running for the long term. You're fighting fires.
Yep.
And this provides, because the tool actually provides a lot of benchmarking and case studies of what other companies have done. And so it's an easy way to actually go through something and just, basically benchmark and learn how to put your business together in an effective way.
And you do have something in here that does show that this is a global movement. This is not just in the United States or maybe a few
Totally.
countries. It says that more than 50% of B Corps are outside the United States. So how is it that you're able to get certain countries, whether it's Japan or China, to play by these, or actually to really push for this? Because it seems like maybe there's more regulation in the United States than anywhere else. And so
Sure.
how is this maybe being adopted by other countries that might not be, I guess you could say, on our side environmentally or
Sure.
economically?
I mean, I do think that, there is, so now I think, the book was probably 50%. Now I think it's 70% are outside the US.
Wow.
And so Europe and Latin America are, the movement is huge. Even, I mean, it's about almost about the size of the United States. The UK is also, as lots of companies are certifying. Australia, less so in Asia. So I think China is a challenge. I've done a lot of work in China, just because the sort of authoritarian system there, I think, is not really conducive to more grassroots. I mean, this is
Mhm.
really sort of a grassroots movement where entrepreneurs are working together to sort of define best practices and collaborate, and that kind of thing. The Chinese government isn't too crazy about people doing so. So
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Right. That's the one that was coming to mind. I'm like, wait
right.
a second. Do you really think that China or even Russia are going to say, you know what, let's whatever they're doing, I mean, they're not too big
Yeah,
of fans of some of these American corporations, but I'm
totally.
just
I
thinking that
think,
it might be tougher for that.
yeah, definitely. I think that so China, there is some companies, some B Corps, but not a lot. But it's more sort of, Europe, UK, I guess part of Europe, although not in the EU, and then Latin America and Australia, or places outside the US where this movement is thriving.
And so, like you said, it's probably great for those maybe doing pretty well. They're sustainable, maybe 1 to 5 million. You're starting to have some freedoms. You have some systems and
Yeah.
processes in place. What are the benefits? Have you noticed that there's maybe a culture buy-in? There's maybe individuals who um, receive opportunities because they are a green friendly company?
Sure.
What's the
I,
great
I think
benefits of this?
definitely. So one of the benefits which I've highlighted a bit is just around a better, more refined business model. But what you're saying here as well, though, around employees, culture is another one. This is a way to actually help recruit talent. Talent is such a challenge today for companies, both recruiting and also retaining. One of the entrepreneurs that I interviewed for this said something that really stuck with me. She said, some of the other CEOs she knows would run into her and say, this B Corp thing, why are you doing that? And she goes, because I don't even have to have an HR department. She said, people never leave my company. And if I'm growing and need to hire people, there's a whole line coming in. And I've, helped me establish all the processes, procedures that I need to be running a really, sort of equitable, sustainable business. So there's a big internal, I think, culture, employee relations component. I think another thing is around investors. There are a lot of investors who have become really excited about this movement because these tools help them do due diligence on their companies. So a lot of the B Corps have gotten, mainstream, all you sort of look up and down Sand Hill Road, the famous place where a lot of the Silicon Valley venture capitalists
Yep.
are, Kleiner Perkins, New Enterprise Associates, Andreessen Horowitz. All these companies have invested in B Corps. A number have now gone public. So anyway, so I think investors are increasingly also interested in this. That's another, sort of benefit, which sort of makes sense. I mean, if it's a better run business, you can see why investors might be engaged.
So I'm looking at some of this, and says on one side stood Buffett, who many investments include. So Warren Buffett, is he on this side too?
He is
Because
not.
okay, so because I'm looking at it, and I was like, I'm just reading through it. So Warren Buffett, I'm looking at some other big players. Well, Elon Musk, you would think, has some type of instrumental play in B Corps because of his contribution to the world, right? I think he's done more for the world to keep it green than any other person on the planet.
Certainly. I mean, I think certainly he says that, and I think that with the impact of Tesla, I think it's a possible. I mean, I think it's a real possibility. I mean, so some of his companies actually are in. So I don't want to get too in the weeds here with like sort of wonky stuff, but there's, and one of the reasons why I call it a movement, because there is these B corporations, and these are companies that are certified. There's also public benefit corporations, which is a new type of company, like a C Corp or LLC.
Wow.
And this is also an innovation that is spread around the world. Now, probably 10 countries have this. It started in the US from the same entrepreneurs that started the B Corp. And at least one of his companies is incorporated as a public benefit corporation, actually, because it's a company that gives a lot more latitude as far as purpose of the business to the entrepreneurs. So I mean, he's engaged in it from that perspective.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, and I guess that was my question before we get into the other book. But like you said, C Corp, S Corp, right?
Yep.
These are titles that people have set up, so they have certain maybe benefits and rewards to have a certain company when it comes to taxation and all that. So
Sure.
you mean to tell me that they are there? That's coming right now. There will be, or there is a B Corp that's out there that is set up in this way, potentially giving them additional tax benefits. Is that right?
So there's a destination benefit corporation, and that that's a separate type of company. It doesn't have tax benefits yet. There is a number of benefits that B Corps have in various, like procurement. Like cities will say, we want to sort of get services from certain types of companies, sometimes women-owned companies or other, sort of minority-owned companies, and B Corps actually are typically on that list. Some companies, some universities like Yale and some others, I know, they actually, if you as an alumni go work for a B Corp, they will forgive part of your loans or sort of your tuition. So there's a
Wow.
number of benefits, but not yet tax benefits.
Got it. And so
Yeah.
just by looking through the very beginning of your book, it seems like one of the
Sure.
major focuses is the carbon in the air. Is that right?
Sure,
Is
definitely. I mean,
is
yeah,
that the major? I mean, obviously, when it comes to climate change, I've always heard that carbon in the air is the biggest cause of this climate
right.
change, which is
Sure.
changing everything. So when somebody becomes part of the B Corp movement, is it really all about monitoring the carbon output, basically
So
through?
certainly that's
Okay,
one of the pillars. You know, one pillar is environment. And that definitely, carbon emissions is a huge part of it. But also other things like waste, other types of, energy use, also play into it. So there's about 200 questions between five different areas from workers and environment and consumers and governance and one more that I'm blanking on. But so carbon emissions definitely play a role, but it's just one of many.
got it, got it. Okay, and so I mean, whenever, I mean, I would assume, and I've talked to a couple people, they have like audits that are done of how much carbon output they
Yes.
put. So I would assume that is that really just, I mean, having core values on the wall is going to attract a certain type of person, whether it's an
Right.
investor, a client, or a team member. And
Sure.
so,
Yep.
hey, this is our major focus. It's like, do you still have that as priority number one? But every once in a while, it might be priority 10, right? Hey, there's a recession. All right, let's put that down at priority 10. Just having it on the wall, though, is that really what's important? And then the other aspect is, how do you know if you're progressing or declining when it comes to that? Because I think that,
Sure.
when it comes to carbon in the air, I've done a little bit of research on this. Nobody really knows what the ideal goal is, right? Nobody knows
Yeah.
how much carbon is supposed to be in there. And then you say,
Sure.
well, is all carbon bad? And they'll say, yeah, well, you actually, when you breathe, you're actually producing
Right.
carbon dioxide, right?
Of
So,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's my rebuttal. And there's
Sure.
probably some
Yeah.
great rebuttals that you have for
Sure.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as far as like just having a vision on the wall, uh, I think this is where this, the sort of the tools and processes that this B Corp movement, sort of is trying to instill in lots of companies is helpful because it actually is both a measurement and governance tool to keep companies aligned on their, sort of the areas they're focusing on. So, it's, companies are measuring and reporting on what their key, sort of metrics and goals are. Their governance, this new type of company is really focused on, sort of aligning the purpose with, the director's duties and with the CEO is going to be doing. So I think that it's an effort to try to get beyond just you know the gap that sometimes exists between saying you're doing something and actually doing it. It's trying to provide a lot of tools to close that gap.
Well, you do talk about, and I've noticed this, you talk about how maybe millennials are not a big fan of capitalism. And
Right.
so, what do you attribute that to? Before you answer, I'll give you my thoughts. I think the school
Sure.
system really does paint a picture that people who make money are bad. And what I've realized is after graduating from college, a lot of people that I've interviewed or worked with, or even, became financially successful myself, capitalism creates freedom. Freedom creates the opportunity to help a lot of people. So the wealthy people that I've met, not all of them, do a lot
Right.
of good. So I think that there's a lot of people out there teaching capitalism is a bad thing whenever they really don't know what it could provide. So what do you attribute this hatred for to capitalism for? To?
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting. I think that, if you look at sort of previous generations, I mean, and I'm 100% behind you or agree with you that, the economic engine that capitalism and markets can provide, this drives innovation in ways that no other system it can. And without innovation, we won't have sort of, success and growth as a country. So 100% agree with you on that. I do think, though, in recent years, there's been challenges with, company, sort of individuals maybe having more challenges in their job markets. Buying a house is a lot harder nowadays. So it's not so. Younger generations, it seems there's more challenges for them than maybe for their parents' generation. I think that might have certainly something to do with it. But yeah,
So, maybe this is another part of it, and maybe you can kind of shed some light on maybe I'm
sure.
right or wrong, but I think that individuals now are going to school, taking on a serious amount of debt, working for a corporation that might be soulless, that there's no emotional attachment to, and they're in debt and there's no pathway out. So they hate the
Sure.
system that they are a part of,
Yeah. Right.
ultimately blaming capitalism for it. So do you think that's a part of it? Because that's what I see more so than anything else.
I think that could be part of it. I think definitely. I think that yeah, I think that the way that sort of the system in some ways has evolved, that a lot of the soul has gotten squoze out of life.
Yes.
And people are just really focused, the companies get very, very focused on these very short-term narrow goals, and they miss actually what some of the sort of broader values in this. I mean, I don't know, you have more experience talking to entrepreneurs than I do probably, but I've always found entrepreneurs have a passion. They get into this. I mean, certainly they've want to make money in some level, but frequently it's they really believe in the product service they have to sell. Some of
Yes.
them want to change in the world, but I think that actually over as the companies get built, as you take on outside investors, as a lot of pressures to really just deliver profit as opposed to delivering on your broader vision, I think this creates some of the soullessness that you were talking about. And I think that that's part of the reason why, yeah, there's a challenge for younger people. I think you're right on the money there.
And so my philosophy is if you give people in school books like Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I keep behind me for that reason,
Sure.
changed my life when I was 22, 23 years old. Did you ever
Wow.
read that book at all?
I probably did, but a long time. It's an older book, right? I mean, it's 20,
Yeah,
30 years old.
1996 it
Yeah.
came out.
Yeah.
Self-published.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, they say ghostwritten by a woman named Sharon Lechter. Anyways,
Okay.
that book changed my
I
life.
don't know. I don't know the. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Great.
there's a history between those two. But anyway,
Yeah.
Sharon Lechter, Robert Kiyosaki got together, worked on this book, came out in 96, self-published, got picked up, huge bestseller, changed the
Sure.
game. And I've interviewed many people. They say that is the one that put them on their pathway to becoming an entrepreneur.
Wow.
So that book right there, give individuals that book. It's called Rich Dad Poor Dad for a reason. It
Sure.
shows you how poor people think of money and how rich people think of money.
Right.
And so I would think that this would change the game right then and there. You ask, I walk around campuses in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I
Sure.
ask everybody in college, I'm like, I'll walk around, it'll be like sorority girls or, or frat guys, and I'll be like, hey, who wants to be rich? Right? Everybody wants to be rich,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody. So rich is not the enemy, right?
Right.
It's whenever they get out and then they start to realize that everything they've been told was wrong, and then they blame the rich. So I think give
Sure.
people the same philosophy that the rich apply to their lives.
Right.
And this is now going to be an even playing field. So when you talk
Mm.
about, I think you have in here 1%,
Yeah.
there's some stats in there. The rich are getting richer. Of course, they're playing by
Yeah.
a different program, in my
Right.
opinion. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I do think that they're playing by a different program. I do think I also think that the way, the system also, I think, contribute. I think that um the system is set up to actually help the rich become richer, I think, without a doubt, in my opinion. So I do think that there is some differences maybe in behaviors, but also I think how the economic system is set up, it's easier for the rich to become increasingly wealthy.
Yeah, well, and it's a snowball too, right? Once you get it
Right.
going, if you have a business, so you say, "Hey, I'm going to tax the rich." Well, what does that even mean? I know people who have multi-million dollar assets, right? Multi-family
Right.
properties, but they won't take an income. So how do you tax them? You know what I mean? So
Sure.
it's like
Right.
this
Yeah.
game, and then you realize, wow, you know what? How
Yeah.
do I avoid
Right.
paying taxes? I take on debt. And so
Sure.
the average person has no idea even how to use debt. I'm thinking, man, what
Yeah.
is it about the school system not teaching about wealth creation? Have all these people who are sharing the wisdom of how to create wealth, have them come in and give a list
Sure.
of books to the students, and you'll learn the game. So you can all become wealthy. And I think that's my philosophy. Think like an entrepreneur, not a corporation. And maybe you could agree with me on this. I
Yep.
do believe that entrepreneurship is the way out of freedom, way to freedom. It's the
Yep.
way out of the chains. But as a capitalist, I have this hard time battling a lot of corporations I'm not a big fan of, right? And I'm a
Yeah.
capitalist. Hey, do your thing, but I'm not a fan. Don't work for these soulless organizations. And so these big corporations, I used to say, hey, let them do their thing. I look at them and I say, you know what? Why would you want to work for these corporations? Don't you
Sure. Yeah.
understand the ideology and the philosophy behind it? So, how do you balance that? Yeah, think like an entrepreneur, but some corporations, I mean, they're getting stronger, they're getting bigger,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I
you
right.
can't have as many people reliant upon those as we think, right? So, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that this other book that is coming out more recently, the Prophet or soon, the Profiteers, actually that's in some ways the core of that book as well, because it's about how the system is set up to very much squeeze the soul out of companies, like we talked about a bit ago, and very much focus so much on the short term as opposed to thinking about broader vision and and responsibility. So a big thing as well is that when they're very focused on short term, they really want to put a lot of their environmental and societal costs on other entities, like be it sort of the environment or society. And it's so interesting to me. I have this anecdote in Better Business, but I think it really applies to our discussion. uh, you know, the ideas that I talk about in both Better Business and The Profiteers actually resonate with ideas that both Elizabeth Warren and Marco Rubio have written about.
Hmm.
Like, there's not a lot of things that I could think of that both Elizabeth Warren and
Yeah,
Marco
no
Rubio
way. No way.
might agree on. But the idea that the system that focuses on very short-term investor returns is creating it's stifling innovation. Like, for instance, Boeing. I mean, just this Boeing disasters that have occurred. They, instead of investing in innovation, they they did all these stock buybacks. They returned all this money to shareholders, and no wonder that they're all having all these all these airplane issues. People are dying. Their products, people are Boeing used to be one of the most seen as one of the most innovative companies in America, and is now sort of a joke in some ways. So I think this is I think right on the money, that we need to think about much more beyond this just very short term profit, and how businesses can fulfill a broader mission.
So I'm interested in this. So you talk about Elizabeth Warren and Marco Rubio. They're
Yeah,
out there and they're talking about all this change. I'm so confused on how they make their money. And maybe you've analyzed this, but Elizabeth Warren and Marco Rubio, I just looked
sure.
up. Elizabeth Warren has a $12 million net worth. How's that even possible? Whenever a salary of like what, 150,000? Marco Rubio is
Yeah,
right around the same. So people think that I'm a major, major Republican. Well, I'm not. I think they're both evil, right? Both sides. So
yeah, yeah,
look at this. I think he has a $12 million net worth, or maybe a one point. I don't know. Anyways, all these people out there who are saying, let's make some changes, all that. Find out how you make your money. There's got to be some back
yeah,
end deals that they're profiting from. And I just think, and here's my biggest
yeah.
rebuttal. We'll get into the profiteers because I think that's interesting. I
Sure.
like the cover of
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
by the way.
Right. Yeah,
Um, so the way I look at this, anybody who's polling for these type of programs, whether it's the Green New Deal, right?
sure,
Is that what the big one is? I think it probably has plays
sure.
a factor into this. I just think it's making government bigger, which makes
Right.
individuals like a Marco Rubio or a Warren a little bit more powerful, and they're able to profit. So they're not really looking out for the world or you; they're looking out for themselves. That's our biggest thing, is like a bigger government. How can you convince me or anybody else like me that, hey, this is actually better for you and it's not so much better for the government? I think that's our
Yeah.
biggest play, right?
Sure. I think, so I may not fully be 100% behind you on things like the Green New Deal. I can see what you're saying around, certainly we don't want to have like a lot of bureaucracy and just sort of
Yes.
government, government for government's sake. But so I teach at a business school. My books are, and my interests are focused on business. I think that so much of the innovations that business has done in the sustainability realm, these are things that can make companies money. These are things that can make the world better. But actually, this entrenched, like sort of very narrow profit oriented companies, they don't want to change. And I think this is an area where actually governments can help, and to take some of the innovations from entrepreneurs and actually level the playing field, make them actually things that all businesses should do. So my perspective, it is very much rooted in sort of the innovation and creativity of entrepreneurs. But if we're going to have a sustainable world, in my opinion, the 10% of entrepreneurs that are really deeply focused on this, or even 100% of entrepreneurs, because they only have very small companies, isn't enough. I mean, we need to actually think about spreading this more widely, and I think that the government can play a role there.
Got it. Yeah, so we probably won't agree on that side too much, but
Right.
everything else, it seems like we're on the same
Yeah.
side with it when it
Sure.
comes to the soullessness of many corporations. So that's good, at least.
Yeah.
There's some common
Yeah.
ground.
Right.
Anyways, let's get into the one that's called the
Sure.
profiteers, all right? How
Yep.
business privatizes profits and socializes costs.
Yeah.
So, whenever I hear socializes costs, I'm thinking automatically of the car industry, or anytime the government steps in and, oh, wait a second, you're failing. I believe if a company's going down, government shouldn't step in.
Yeah.
Let it fail, because the innovation of an entrepreneur will
Sure.
come in and fix this somewhere. So I'm with you to some degree here, but what is this book all about, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I think it relates to this actually, what you're just saying. Companies, large companies, very much want to, like, and you see, I think the oil companies, this might be another area where we don't agree on. I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
uh,
I respect
but
your courage to come on here, knowing
yeah,
my background or anything.
yeah.
I mean, and I'm not too confrontational, so let's just have some.
No,
Yeah,
that's great. I think
appreciate
I
you.
think it's important. I mean, I think there needs to be more discussion, broader discussion of different ideas.
Yeah,
So, so exactly what you're saying, these large companies, they're willing to say America is capitalist and we want to have our freedom and free market when things are going fine, and don't want any government intervention. But like, hey, they run into problems and they want to have a bailout, and so this is what, and
yeah.
everyone pays. So
That to
so
me
I
disgusts me. Yes.
yeah, so I think that is so. I think this is a part of a bigger issue where, because companies are very focused on sort of their short-term profit, they are not as likely to sort of think about the long term, and then they run into these, sort of crises and problems, and they have to be bailed out, basically. So that's certainly part of it.
Yeah. And so I mean, yeah, you're talking about it, whether it's the banks or whether it's
Right.
to me the car industry, right? And the CEOs were rewarded, right? Or even Wall
Yeah,
Street,
totally. Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
talking
Right.
about many people. I'm with you. So is there a remedy in the book? Is there anything that you propose? I mean, to me, it wasn't even the companies don't get the money without a congressman or a senator signing off on this stuff. So in my opinion, it all starts with politics, but maybe
Yeah.
you have something else here.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, I do think so. So at the end of the book, I talk about a couple different processes. So I do think, again, entrepreneurs and creating new robust business models. I, the B Corp stuff we talked about, I think is emblematic of that. So part of the thing that I think is very powerful in that is that, these companies all are well connected, work together. There's networks, where people are spreading best practice and learning. Investment markets, I think, also are something that is really important to this, because a lot of investors are so focused on the short term that they actually are creating problems in other companies that they are investing in. So, if you have, like, so many large investors nowadays, they're so big, they basically just hold the entire market. So when they're choosing equities, it's, their traditional way of doing that is saying, like, okay, I'm just going to focus on GM, for instance. And GM, I'm going to do some analysis on GM. But actually, when GM runs into problems and it sort of has spillovers of its economic problems, other companies in the portfolio actually end up doing worse. So actually, if investors have a broader perspective and think about, more diversification on long-term risk, I think this is a way to sort of think about addressing some of these things. And I do think policy plays a role too. I think that actually, some sort of standards and rules of the game around, social and environmental topics are important too.
So is there a certain maybe state or district or company that's maybe really making a push in the right direction that you've noticed that could be an example? When I see this, I'm thinking to
Sure.
myself, I see you talk a little bit about low wages in the summary of this
Right.
book. This book is coming out, I believe, when's it coming out?
May 14th.
May 14th. So it's coming out very soon.
Yeah.
I don't even see a sample
Yeah.
of it yet, but just in the
Oh,
summary, it talks about low wages. I think the state that is implementing the highest wages is California, which also they have the lowest or the highest unemployment. So I think it's 5.3% as of last week.
sure.
So to me, they're connected. But is there any state or district or company that's really applying what you're talking about in this book and doing it the right way?
I mean, I think a company that is doing thing is Patagonia. Uh, this is, I mean, a company example that's used a lot.
Outdoorsy, right? These people were
Yeah,
outdoors maniacs, which I don't know much about them, but every time I see somebody running the lake at North Park, you're probably familiar with North Park, right?
sure,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
And I see them and they look like an outdoorsy woman. They got a Patagonia
yeah,
hat. So yeah, okay. I don't know much about this company though.
sure. Yeah. So Patagonia is really focused on, trying to not just church, so they're focused on quality. So not necessarily making fashion type of things that last. Maybe that's why people have it, because it actually will, sort of last for a while. They repair things. So, they encourage you, like if you have a problem, no, don't just go buy a new one. We'll actually repair it so you can save it for longer. They will take clothes back. So this is Patagonia thing I'm wearing right here. Let's say I want to go in and get something new, I can actually turn this back into them, and they have like resale market. So they try to actually, promote quality and consumption. Obviously people have to buy things, but don't just buy hundreds of things, or don't just buy, 5 or 6. Get a couple good quality things, and then you can repair them or you can reuse them. It's not unlike when my grandparents or even parents were living. And I think that, not to say we should go back to how things used to be, but you see the crazy sort of Shein hauls and so much of the fast fashion, which is not very high quality. It's actually not very good for the world. I think that is a company that's trying to exemplify like a better model of consumption.
Wow. Okay. So you're talking about less is more, right? Higher quality.
Yeah, right.
That's really tough for the average. I mean, when you're talking about Amazon stores, right? These are low
Sure.
quality items potentially that people
Yeah.
buy at a low price, and we're getting into a leasing lifestyle, right? Where people are leasing their cars or leasing their houses, which I'm
Yeah.
totally in favor of leasing their houses, but or apartments, but it's everything's temporary, whether it's relationships or clothes.
Yeah.
It's cheap, throw it away, and there's a lot of consumption, and I think it might be the American way. So you're saying that
I
that
think it
culture
is.
has to change more than anything.
I think that culture is creating some, yeah, it's creating some environmental and societal problems that, might not are not that sustainable.
Hmm. Gotcha. Okay, so Patagonia though, I'm gonna look into them. And is it
Yeah.
because of the leader, or is it just because of the culture that they are all
It's
about?
it's I think the leader started it, and he just recently is retiring, but built up this company. And a lot of times, I mean, I'm you know, a lot of times I've found a lot of this starts with the leader, and the leader, the entrepreneur, is very passionate about various issues. And they end up, sort of inculcating this in the business. And then, when it's deep in the culture, it sort of self perpetuates itself.
Hmm. Got it. Okay, so an expose of how society pays for corporations, free lunch, and the cost of environmental damage, low wages, systematic discrimination, and cheap goods. Yeah, when it comes to cheap goods, I just think that that's the direction, right? Everything is
Yeah.
going to temporary, and yeah, maybe that does hurt society to some degree, but everything's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
Therefore, they
Yeah.
have to have more and more and more of it. Wow.
Right.
Interesting. So that comes out in May, The Profiteers. Outside of your own books, we always ask this question. Is there one book that stands out in your life as a defining moment? As I brought up Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it changed my life. Anything like that for you?
Yeah. Defining moment. That's a good one.
Maybe
I
put you on
don't
this
have,
pathway?
I don't have anything that defines is sort of so deep in defining. But there is a book from a number of years ago by an economist named Mariana Mazzucato
Hmm.
called The Entrepreneurial State.
Oh,
And she really sort of changed my mind on a lot of things. And you should take a look, because she focuses on innovations in government, and how a lot of government innovations actually government funded innovations underlie so many of our technologies. And so we see something like Apple as being super innovative. But actually, many of the foundational technologies that are underlying Apple actually came from government funding.
Like DARPA,
Uh,
right?
exactly. So, like DARPA, there's a variety of them, and so she really, this is called the entrepreneurial state. Sort of tries to, you know, change our minds about like not seeing government as necessarily just a rigid bureaucratic entity that creates costs and problems, but actually thought of another way is a way to get fundamental innovation into the world too.
Gotcha. Well, it always scares me because I hear those type of, and the reason why is because if you go back into history and you say, oh, well, government really does produce a lot of good, right? And a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
you just you just go a little bit further and you go back to 1930s and you got Hitler creating all kinds of
Sure. Totally.
insane stuff. Volkswagen, right? It changed the game when
Yeah.
it comes to vehicles. So like, there's a lot of things that they
Sure.
create that's good, but a lot of bad. And
Sure.
there's a silver lining, I guess, but there's a gray line, and it's like, oh, how much control do
Yeah.
you want to give them? But I've never heard of that book, The Entrepreneurial State, though. Interesting,
Yep.
huh? All right,
Yeah.
check that out. We love hearing from books that we've never heard of before. So I write down a list, and I'm like, all right, that's going to be on the list. I'll at least listen to a sample of it,
Okay.
give it a shot. But Christopher, is there a website or a social media channel that people can find you on? Are you on X? Are you a LinkedIn
Uh,
guy? What do you do?
I'm more of LinkedIn, so people can find me on LinkedIn. Please connect and share your stories. I mean, I think one of the reasons I was excited to come on here is that I am not an entrepreneur much myself, although I do a variety of little things here and there. But I love researching and writing about entrepreneurs. I write a regular Forbes column on entrepreneurship. So yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. The website is just my name, chrismarquis.com. So that people can actually access me there too.
So it's Marquis. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
Marquis before. My
Which is
apologies.
fine. No worries.
Okay, all right.
No worries. I'm used to it. So
Got it. All right. Well, yeah. Anybody who promotes the entrepreneurial spirit is an ally of ours. So no matter what, man, even if we didn't agree on everything, you're
sure.
still spreading the awareness of capitalism and entrepreneurship, and we commend you for that. So thanks for doing that, man.
Thank you.
And you're a Pittsburgh guy, so whenever you come back to visit your parents, let me know. Maybe we can meet up and
Will do.
hang out around the lake. North Park has this
Yeah,
awesome
yeah.
boathouse
Right.
restaurant,
Yeah.
so we can meet up
Right.
there.
That'd be cool.
Anyways, Christopher, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I don't know
Totally.
what time it is in Cambridge right now. What time is it?
It's a quarter to 4 p.m.
Oh, okay. So it's not too late. I've interviewed
Not
people
too
and they're
too
like,
late.
yeah, it's 2 a.m. Here. I'm like, what? You said you scheduled this for 2 a.m. So, anyways,
Yeah.
good stuff, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Excellent.
And guys, his book is coming out May 14th, The Profiteers: How Business Privatizes Profits and Socializes Cost. Pick it up, look for him on LinkedIn. And remember, $1 million book will lead to a $1 million life. Right on.